Okay, I'm about to read from the Egmont group. In fact, what I'm going to read is the Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units, Operational Guidance for FIU Activities and the Exchange of Information, which was approved by the Egmont Group Heads of Financial Intelligence Units in July 2013. It's 16 pages. Keeping in mind the diversity of the Egmont Group membership, this document has been created to provide guidance to FIUs in relation to international cooperation, information exchange, and other FIU activities. It provides a framework to which the Egmont Group membership as a whole can aspire. FIUs are strongly encouraged to implement these guidelines to the greatest extent possible. Introduction. The Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units Charter and the Principles for Information Exchange between Financial Intelligence Units are obligatory documents, and their elements are subject to the support and compliance process. The operational guidance for FIU activities and the exchange of information can assist FIUs to become more effective and efficient. However, its elements are not subject to the support and compliance process. Number 2, member FIUs have identified a need to maximize optimized information exchange and efficient and effective cooperation among and between FIUs. And third, as such, the FIUs are encouraged to ensure that national legal standards do not inhibit the exchange of information between or among FIUs. In this essence, the Egmont Group membership affirms ascension to the standards set out in the Financial Action Task Force, FATFI recommendations, and associating interpretive notes on Financial Intelligence Units, Recommendation 29, and other forms of international cooperation, Recommendation 40. Members are responsible to familiarize themselves with these requirements as they have not been reiterated in this document. Where the language of the FATFI recommendations 29 to 40 have been reiterated in this document, it is footnoted. General framework. This document is expected to evolve and strengthen over time as the Egmont Group identifies better practices and applications that assist Egmont members. As such, which is paragraph 5, I suppose, additional operational guidance may result from studies and projects created by Egmont working groups. Although not required, member FIUs should endeavor to use these results to inform the practices when engaging in international cooperation and information exchange. Section C, Egmont Operational Guidance, Guidance for International Cooperation and Information Exchange. Paragraph 6, irrespective of differences in the definition of the predicate offenses, FIUs should strive for the free exchange of information between the FIUs. Paragraph 7, FIUs are encouraged to discover alternative means to cooperate when confronted with obstacles. 8, the Egmont Group encourages the broadest information exchange. It does not limit this to Egmont Group members exclusively. However, it is within the rights of every FIU to decide only to exchange information with Egmont Group members. Channels for information exchange. FIUs are encouraged to have procedures in place to ensure that the connection to Egmont's secure web is adequately maintained and that it is accessed on a regular and consistent basis to ensure the timely receipt of requests of information. Ideally, FIUs should check the ESW daily, especially to ensure urgent requests are suitably addressed. The same recommendations apply for FIUs using other secure channels to exchange information. Memoranda of Understanding between FIUs. Paragraph 10. Wherever possible, exchanges of information should take place without the need for a Memorandum of Understanding. Paragraph 11. In cases where FIUs are required by domestic legislation to enter into MOUs in order to exchange information, consider point A, not imposing undue impediments or limitations on the exchange of information, and point B, making all efforts to enter into such MOUs before cooperation is requested by foreign counterpart FIUs. Making all efforts to enter into such MOUs before cooperation is requested by foreign counterpart FIUs. Paragraph 12. FIUs that do not require an MOU to share information should make their best efforts to cooperate by establishing MOUs for those FIUs that do require MOUs to share information. Paragraph 13. FAUs that receive requests to enter into MOUs should consider prioritizing requests that come from the FAUs that require MOUs by law. Paragraph 14. Ideally, the FIU making the requesting should send a letter of interest, the text of the proposed MOU, and the relevant domestic legislation to the foreign counterpart FIU. The FIU receiving the request should endeavor to respond within a reasonable period of time, indicating proposed revisions to the draft MOU and including relevant domestic provisions. Once an agreed MOU has been reached, the parties should arrange the means for signing the memorandum. Paragraph 15. The Egmont Group provides a model MOU, which FIUs are free to use in negotiation. Guidance for FIUs making requests. Paragraph 16. FIUs should endeavor to cooperate with foreign counterpart FIUs as soon as the assistance required is identified. If necessary, the FIU making the request can identify a deadline or an urgent request, including justification. This will allow the FIU receiving the request to accurately prioritize the request. Where a request is only deemed partially urgent, the relevant urgent section should be clearly identified. FIUs should refrain from arbitrary use of this terminology. Requests designated as urgent should remain the exception rather than the rule. 18. Where appropriate, especially in the case of urgent requests and to speed up proceedings when requesting, FIU may ask for prior consent for further use of the information to be granted directly, together with its reply itself. In such cases, the FIU making the request is required to give all details necessary for the FIU receiving the request to determine whether prior consent can be granted. For example, purpose of the request, institution, or to whom the information will be disclosed and for what reason. 19. FIUs requesting information are encouraged to disclose all information needed so that FIU receiving the request can properly process the request. This information ideally includes A. the reason for the request, B. a description of the suspicious transactions under analysis and the grounds for suspicion, C. details of the persons or companies involved, name and date of birth for individuals, name and register office for companies, as well as the transactions of the accounts used, D. the information requested and the purpose for which it will be used, including, if foreseen, further dissemination, E. whether the request for information is based on reports or information received or is on behalf of another authority. If the request is on behalf of another domestic agency, that agency should be clearly identified along with the expected use of information. Whether the FIU receiving the request is authorized to disclose the request in full or in part to third parties if such disclosure is required to obtain the requested information. G. signature from authorizing official. H. range of periods be analyzed. And I. any need for urgency. Paragraph 20. FIUs are encouraged to use the Egmont request for FIU information form and cover letter. Templates can be found in Annex A and B. Guidance for FIUs receiving requests. Paragraph 21. All incoming requests for information should be answered as soon as possible, whether positive or negative. Ideally, acknowledgement of receipt should include a case reference number, the case number of the FIU making the request, and contact details of the analyst responsible for responding to the FIU making the request. The turnaround time of each request may differ, depending on the nature of the request. While acknowledging the need for flexibility, the following turnaround times are provided as a guide. Responses. As deemed appropriate and timely, consent with the urgency of the request, or within 1 month if possible. Additional time is reasonable if there is a need to query external databases or third parties. Ideally, negative responses are provided as soon as possible. And negative in this sense probably means if nothing is found. Feedback as deemed appropriate and upon request. Paragraph 22. FIU should consider prioritizing urgent requests and liaise with the FIU making the request if there are any concerns about the classification of the requests.